Well, first, let me back up a second. How many do you have a number of how many missions you went on when you were with SOG?
Yeah, I mean, I have SOG missions
Mm-hmm.
and then non-SOG missions
Hmm.
that I went on. Um, so the SOG ones, the ones that um, went across the border, that kind
Mm-hmm.
of stuff. I had 20 of those, and then probably that many or more in-country missions. They were much shorter.
Yeah.
Sometimes it was just uh, let's let's go set up an ambush tonight. I mean, sometimes, in between missions, I I liked a little faster turnaround,
Mm-hmm.
and some people did. Some people wanted as much time as they could get between missions. I preferred to keep a regular pace. Um, I didn't want to get lax. I didn't want to have time to start playing. Well, what if, or that was really close last time. You know, when I'm thinking about last time, and I process that when I get back, what did I learn from it? What do I do next time to be better? That's what I want to focus on, and I want to be training. And with my teams, we had what we call post mission training.
Mm-hmm.
When we would get back after the debrief, we would go through um, our own little after action review.
Mm-hmm.
What did we do well? What did we not do so well on? What do we need to practice? Like throwing hand grenades. I found that seemed to be difficult for a lot of people. I mean, you can't just lob that thing 10 to 15 feet out in front of you because you'll
Yeah.
get hit.
Yeah.
So So how do you do it? If you stand up, you're going to get hit before you throw it. So I used to make my guys practice, throwing from the prone or just from the side and being able to get it out there fast enough and
Yeah.
accurate enough. Because I carried a lot of them for a
Yeah.
reason.
Yeah.
So um, practicing how to put the claymores out, and I started putting them out in layers. So at the maximum reach, we would have a row of claymores on the likely avenues of approach, at night. Um, and then about halfway out, we would have some more. So we'd set off that first row if the bad guy started to attack us. I mean, and that would just really stun them. I mean,
Yeah.
you get seven or so claymores to detonate simultaneously, and you're putting 4,900 steel balls in the air going out after them. You cut a swath through them. It scares them. It's just a concussion from it stuns them, and they finally get over that, and they start after you again, and then they hit another row. It gets their attention. Now they're getting a little gun shy, and as we would back away, then we put claymores out with time fuses, 30
Yeah.
second
Yeah.
fuse or
Yeah.
whatever. So they're starting to come after us, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, a claymore goes off in the middle of them, things like that. But anyway, there's always things to train on when
Mm-hmm.
you come back. So
Gotcha. So it's pretty constant. There's
yeah,
always something going on. I asked that in terms of kind of like to get an idea of how many missions you ran because
yeah, you don't want to go through all of them right
that's
now.
exactly where I'm going. I was gonna say, well, we could go. What was your next mission? But we, it's just not feasible with the scope of what we're doing right now. So I'm gonna have to rely on you a little bit because um, I don't I tried my best, but I do not have a document to go through with the highlights of your career. I'm gonna have to rely on you a little bit. So when I ask after your first mission, what was the next, how do I phrase this? The next event, because there's notable events all the time, but in terms of you evolving as an operator, in terms of you as evolving as a leader, taking that into account, what was the next mission you went on that really sticks out to you, as something that, is notable for the show here?
Um, well, we could go to the second one. Um, with the second mission, we were again hit on the landing zone, but we were hit with gas. They actually used our gas against us on the landing zone. So we got off the aircraft, and all of a sudden we've got gas, and we were not prepared for it. We didn't have masks with us or anything.
Tear gas, CS gas.
Right.
Okay.
So we were not prepared to deal with that, but there was enough wind blowing in the right direction that we decided we were going to stay on the ground, and we were going to go after them. Mm-hmm. Because we also we were going to an ammunition cache site that they had, and typically they had North Vietnamese troops that were lower level, not hardcore guys, but they would put them out in Laos, Cambodia, and places to help store supplies, load trucks, unload trucks as things were being moved down the highways and stuff. So they were not as good as the people we would normally run up to. So we figured that's what we had run into here, was these lower level troops, and we just went after them, and they didn't know what to do when we came after them. There wasn't all that many of them, so we took them out, and we decided, we could now move and get to the storage dump before it got dark, and sneak in there and see what we needed to see. But we were, well, if I backtrack for just a second, sure. The people that I talked about, the 7 guys that got killed, that I had to inventory their stuff on, they were on a mission. And their mission was to plant bad ammunition in an NVA site. Mm-hmm. It had kind of come full circle, and now we had their mission, and we were going out to put the bad ammunition in the storage site. So it was called at that time Eldest Son. Yeah. So we had various types of ammunition that we needed to put in the supply dump, put it in there so it didn't stand out. So anyway, we go down, we do a little quick recon, we let it get dark, and myself and one of the indigenous, we decided it would be easiest for us to go in there and place the ammunition ourselves and keep the rest of the team right outside the storage area for support if we got in trouble. So we're in there, and we're in the process of putting some ammunition, and I heard a growl. Something growled, and I looked around, and there's a big dog sitting, right next to me. It doesn't appear to be happy. And I had a 22 high standard pistol with an integrated silencer on it. Yeah. And I grabbed it, but as I was coming out with it, the dog jumped, launched at me. So I got it up enough that I hit him a couple of times in the chest and the stomach with the 22. and another time in the head when he hit the ground. Um, so that was my first encounter with a live encounter with a dog like that.
Oh man.
They used them to track us with a
Yeah.
lot. But so I learned about doing the reconnaissance, going in with one other person, separating from the team, and going in with one other person to do something very specific, having to deal with a dog and hide the dog's body, and come back out. And we were also planning on doing a night extraction. And I used to do that all the time at Fort Bragg. We used to practice that a lot. So we were able to pull off a night extraction and come back. So, I mean, we were not out there all that long, but,
Yeah.
A lot of things happened, but it gave me more, more confidence in my ability to sneak around, to be invisible, to deal with something out of nowhere, like a dog all of a sudden being on me. The night extraction. So it really helped me with my confidence and knowing that we could do a lot of different things. It bonded me more with the team. And it was starting to build in my mind the concept of what if you didn't go out with 7 or 8 people? What if you went out with a much smaller team? In fact, I even thought about what if I just went out there? It would be, you could get me in and out so fast, I would be harder to find because I'm just one person. I can move quieter. I can be more stealthy. I can go in and do something. If you're not sending me out to, attack a 500-man battalion or something, but if you're sending me, like, if it's a real recon mission where I'm going to sit on a side of a cliff and watch traffic and, report that in and, maybe have airstrikes kind of hit them, things like that, because they'll start looking, trying to find somebody once that starts to happen. If it's just me, I mean, I can hide. I can cover myself up with dirt and just hide and do it. And you only have one person that you have to come get. And, if things go sideways, the most you lose is one person. You don't lose a whole team. Anyway, that started that process turning over in my mind. How could I do that? So I started thinking through it, practicing on my own some different techniques. And then later on, I actually did a one-man mission, but it wasn't a planned one. It just came about.
Right. I think we'll get to that. So something has come up for me, and this is, I'm going to make full use of your ability to describe the experience. I want you to, and this is in a sense to take the audience with you on a mission, but I really want you to be at a specific mission or a hypothetical, as detailed as possible, moving through the jungle, your techniques at moving stealthily, the smells, the sensations, to take us with you on a mission, if possible. Would you be interested, or what kind of comes up? Do you think that's something you'd be able to do?
Sure, we can talk about them.
Yeah. Is there one specifically that comes to mind that you could walk us through?
Yeah, I can pick one. I just want to go back about 15 or so years first.
Okay.
And I discovered, when I was little, that I had like spidey senses. I could hear dog whistle, the silent dog whistles. I could hear that high frequency the dog whistle. I had very, very sensitive hearing. My eyesight was incredible. I used to tell people I could see a gnat climbing up a pine tree 500 meters away and tell you what sex it was. A little exaggeration, but yeah, I had incredible eyesight and night vision. I mean, I could see in the dark and smell, taste. I just, I lost the hearing, some of that right away, and across time, just with age, I've lost the visual acuity, and I don't see as well at night now. But at that time, I could smell them because I didn't, I wasn't raised on the food, on the Vietnamese food. So it stood out to me. I could smell it. The spices and the things that they ate stood out. And I could smell it, on their breath from a distance. Smell smoke from their little cooking fires. I could hear really well. I could just sense things. And that gave me, I think it gave me an advantage. I mean, there were a couple of times where I could smell people and I stopped the team and we discovered there was an ambush right up in front of us. I was smelling what they had for lunch, breathing, because there was a little breeze coming toward me and it was bringing that smell right to me. And it stood out. And I've had guys, special ops guys from Afghanistan say the same thing, because it's a different type of food. And they had noticed it on missions before with people, with the Afghanis, because it was just different and it stood out when you smelled it and you said, whoa, there's a person there someplace. So anyway, using those senses, really helped me to be able to sniff them out, to hear what was going on, and understand about sound and sound attenuation, and knowing that if I'm near a stream and the stream's making noise, that blocks a lot of my ability to hear sounds away from me. But people who are away from me, they can hear me much easier. I don't realize the sounds that I'm making and the noise. So if I'm close to water, I have to be very careful, because sound travels so much faster and farther that way. But if the water's down below me, if I listen, if there's somebody down there, I can hear them walking. If they talk, I can hear it. If they accidentally hit the butt of their weapon against a tree, I mean, that sound just comes at you. So there are things like that, being able to use your senses, that I would work with my guys with. And we had a little phrase and a little signal: be invisible. And we would remind each other of that on a regular basis, once we would go on a mission. So I started training the teams that I worked with to do that, be invisible. If they're deer hunters listening to what I'm talking about, when a deer is approaching you, if the deer is coming directly at you, it's more difficult to see than if it's going horizontal across in front of you. What gives away a deer, though, very often when it's coming directly at you, is it has a tendency to turn its head and look. And that movement of turning the head and look makes it visible to you, and all of a sudden you see it. So talking to my guys about move directly, toward where you think the enemy is. Don't move across in front of them. You move in front of them, they're going to see you. But if you can move directly toward them and watch, if they're moving out to the sides or whatever, you'll pick up on their movement. A lot of times they may grab a small bush or a little tree to steady themselves, and they don't think anything about it because it doesn't move here, but it does at the top. You'll see the vegetation moving, even though you can't see a person. And you know, hey, there's somebody down at the base of what you're looking at there. So just stuff like that of being invisible and using your senses as you move around and being able to hear people, sense where they are. I mean, I even while I was there, I could hear your heartbeat when you got scared, when your heart would start pounding. If you got close to me in the dark, I could hear it. I could smell your sweat. You have people, sometimes people will say, you'll see a little kid messing with a dog, and the dog growls at him, and the father says, no, stay away from him. He knows you're afraid of him. And you wonder, how does he know I'm afraid of him? He smells your sweat. Fear sweat is different than normal sweat. It has a different smell to it. It has a stronger, more pungent smell when people are afraid. When they get scared, their sweat stinks, and it stinks differently than normal sweat. You know, so if you're paying attention, you can start to smell that. So someone, and there's an example later of a guy who was walking up on me in the dark. I could hear his heart. I could hear him breathing. I could smell the sweat on him because I knew he was scared. He knew he was right among us someplace, but didn't know where we were, and he was really scared. Even though I couldn't see him, I knew exactly where he was because of the senses and the smell. So, you know, once he got to the point where I had no option, I was able to snatch him out of the air and, you know, drag him to the ground. But anyway, training like that and training the people to do that. And they loved it. And they were always, you know, doing their little invisible sign to each other if somebody was making noise or not moving slowly enough. It was not uncommon for us, and we were where I worked most of the time, the vegetation was really thick. It wasn't uncommon to move at a speed of like 100 meters an hour. I mean, that's 25 feet longer than a football field, and it takes you an hour to go that far because you're just barely moving things to get through. You know, you're going toe first with your foot, and then the heel, toe first, then down with the heel. And what it does is it muffles the sound of a twig or whatever you might break when you come down on it. The sound doesn't go out front like it does when your heel comes down. You know, this is like a little echo chamber. It just sends the sound out. So going very slowly and listening. And I don't know if Tilt talked about it, but a lot of teams, they just had a rule, you know, like you move 15 minutes, you stop for 10. You move 15, you stop for 10 and listen. So you do that, particularly when you got close. You didn't walk on the trails. You walked off the trail, then into thicker stuff. So you had to move slower anyway. When you got off the aircraft insertion on a mission, as soon as you ran into the jungle, you'd go just a little ways and you'd stop for security off. Everybody, you'd go down on one knee. Everybody had a different area to cover when you stopped because you can't hear. After being on that helicopter for 45 minutes or an hour, your hearing threshold has been reduced. There's been a temporary change in your hearing threshold. So you need some time for it to come back up so that you can hear. You've been smelling all the JP4 in the aircraft while it was flying. You need time to get that out of your system. So now you can start to smell people or smell food or fires or whatever's going on around you. So your senses need a little time to recover. and you're being really quiet to see if you hear any movement or any bad guys around you, and you're listening for them. So a lot of techniques like that SOG teams used, and I spent a lot of time training my guys just on how to move, how to find the enemy, how to not let them see you. So,
what was the jungle like?
Not your friend. It had wait a minute vines, and depending on the time of the year, if it was the monsoon season, man, you're in a rainforest. It was just going to rain every day and hard. It was going to be wet and slippery. The areas we were in were covered with, if you want to see something scary, Google Vietnam land leeches, and you'll have some good little videos of them out there. They're an inch and a half long, maybe, and they're like an inchworm when they move. But and they can hear. When they hear you or sense your body temperature, they go straight up and they start locking in on where are you, and then they're coming. I mean, they just start moving across the ground, and they'll get on you, and they're little until a few hours later, and they're as big as your thumb, hanging on the side of your neck or inside your shirt or your pants leg or on the side of your face when you wake up in the morning. So you have the leeches everywhere. You have 40 something different types of venomous snakes. Snakes didn't tend to be that much of a problem, although you did see them from time to time. And the problem is if you're that far out in the middle of nowhere, away from friendly forces, and one of them bites you, and that's it. You're not going to survive. And I mean, even if we call right then, by the time we could get help out, get you extracted, and get you back, it's too late. So you definitely didn't want them to bite you. Tigers, and tigers were out there, and you could hear them moving around, and they were hungry. A lot of times they were wounded from bombing and different things, so they were ready to take somebody. You had all kind of different sounds, different birds, different bugs, and you learn to use those. I mean, at night when we would get in our position, I would build 4 ground level quadrants around me. What do I hear in this quadrant? What do I hear over here? And then I do the aerial ones, and then use that to wake me up. If the bugs got quiet in one of those quadrants, something's there. Silence wakes you up and says, why is there nothing in that quadrant? Why don't I hear anything? That's because something's over there. And maybe the bad guys, sneaking up, trying to sneak up on you. And, so being able to use your senses like that, listen, birds will fly. Did the birds just stop hollering, or did they fly also? If they flew, there's somebody over there. If something big comes close to them, they'll get quiet. But if it's people, they tend to fly. So just reading the signs of the jungle and what's going on around you, on all your missions, you got to do that, because it can give you a lot of information about what's about to happen.
Can you, I would like to now get into, now that we've built this world, so to speak, for those of us who haven't been there, what's the next mission where you got into some serious combat? We've talked about the first one. We've talked about the second one. What was the next mission where maybe the next mission where you had inserted, you're in the jungle and the senses tell you that it's about to kick off, and then it does.
Yeah, it happened several times, but one of the earlier ones was like that, where the bad guys were moving all around us, and we're trying to stay quiet, not let them find us. And then when they did, and we made contact, and we're fighting, trying to get away, and there were a lot of them. They would not stop coming at us. And it was the first time that I had an opportunity to really use napalm. Not just have it put on a hilltop out in the distance or something, but use it to actually stop the assault on my position. And, I thought that my experience was napalm was the most cruel, brutal, barbaric thing that you could do, because you just literally opened the gates of hell, and anybody who survived it did not want any part of it again. So I found that if I put it close to me when they were trying to come up on us, you'd have some people walking around like human torches. They were just covered with it, and they were just stumbling around until they finally fall over and just be consumed. It would really scare the people who survived. So I started using it quite a bit and putting it in, pretty close, because it would make them back off, and it could, even with large groups, it would stop them from coming at you. The issue that we ran into with it is it's designed to go off when it hits the ground, but it really doesn't know the difference between the ground and a tree. So all of a sudden it goes off in the canopy, 100 feet up in the air.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of coming down and hitting where you really wanted it to go, now it scatters out, and there are gobs of, napalm going all over the place. And, it's like glue when it gets on you. It just sticks and it burns, and it's really hard to put out. It's hard to get off of you. When it explodes, it takes the oxygen out of the air. It superheats the air that's left. You have to be careful about inhaling too soon, because you can, cook your lungs with it. Pass out. The smell is unreal from the burned humans, and because it just turns people into crispy critters, and the smell is sickening. You have people starting to throw up because they can't handle the smell, and they're choking because they're not getting enough air. But it will stop them from coming. So I started using that a lot. But it always really made me nervous, because if that pilot coming in to drop it makes a mistake, if you make a mistake, if you miscalculate, what it's going to do in the trees or all that kind of stuff, you can put it on you. And I've had a few times where, some of myself included, it got some little stuff on us, got burned, that's collateral damage to hitting the bad guys.
Yeah.
So it always made me a little nervous to use it, but it definitely worked.
Oh. What was the specific time? It seems like there's a specific time that kind of brought this up, where they were coming at you, and that's when you made the decision.
Yeah, this was about third or fourth mission.
Mm-hmm.
When the first time I got an opportunity to use that, and I was working the radio, so I was able to call it in. And I'd never seen it up close before. And even, in training, when you would see it used, back in the States at Fort Bragg, out at the range, when you would see them drop it, they drop it out in a big open area.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it would come down, it would make this big ball of flame, and it all stays right together. But when you're dropping it in double and triple canopy jungle, it scatters and it spreads, and it doesn't hit right where you think it's going to hit.
Yeah.
And the pilot knows there's a jungle canopy there, but they don't know how high it is. They don't know if it's double or triple. They don't know how far you are away. They're making their best guess. But between the two of you, you need somebody with experience on the ground.
Mm-hmm. That's why you're carrying the radio.
Yeah. And look around and say, whoa, yeah, I'd like for it to land right here, but it's not going to, because it's going to hit those trees, and it may come over here where we are.
Yeah.
So
taking all these variables into account.
Yeah. And you're doing that all the time while, people are shooting at you. You're trying to make decisions about moving, about throwing a grenade, about, can we stop here long enough to put a napalm in there? So a lot of things are going on. You're talking on the radio, and you're making a lot of decisions, and hoping they're good decisions. So.
I'm going to say a term, and I want the first thing that comes up for you, kind of like that classic test. White phosphorus.
Similar to napalm, and that when a white phosphorus rocket or grenade goes off, you immediately see this very dense white smoke, but you'll see these little trailers going out from it in different directions. Those are chunks of white phosphorus. And if one of those jokers lands on your arm, it'll burn right through your arm. It's almost like having napalm get on you. So they're great if you need to cover your retreat. As you're moving back, it's hard for them to see through it. Mm-hmm. You got to make sure you can throw it far enough that you're not going to get hit with it. Some people didn't like to carry them because that's one of the munitions that you have with you, that if a bullet hits it, it will crack that shell. And when it cracks the shell, that stuff is coming out, and it can take out the whole team, particularly the person that has it. And I used to carry one or two in my rucksack, and I hear people say that, well, don't wear it on your web gear because it might get hit. It doesn't matter if it gets hit in your rucksack.
Yeah, you're done too.
It's the same thing. It's going to explode. It's going to take you with it. But if I used to like to set them in front of a claymore. So when I set off a claymore, I got the concealment from the dense smoke. But in addition to those steel balls that are going out there, I got the chunks of white phosphorus going out there too. And that's scary if you're on the other end of that.
White phosphorus scares the shit out of me.
Yeah.
I've read about it. I've heard about it. Recently, I had a friend from my military history community up here in Oregon. He brought some stuff over, some munitions that SOG guys such as yourself used for an upcoming video that I've told you about. And one of the things he brought over was a demilitarized white phosphorus grenade. And that was really incredible to take a look at, because in the world of pursuing these artifacts, if it's hard to demilitarize, it's really hard to collect. You can't get an exam. You're not going to be able to pay me enough money to have a live Willie Pete, nor is it legal. But, guys bring things home all the time, and, warehouses have stuff. Like, I've heard stories of guys finding crates of World War II Willie Pete, and it's still alive. And it's like, well, we got to do something about this. But so this is really incredible artifact. And I'm asking this guy, I said, how do you demilitarize Willie Pete? And he says, well, when white phosphorus comes in contact with oxygen, that's when it starts its ignition process, and it burns at something like 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit. It'll muscle, bone, skin, it'll go straight through you, like you just said. And he said, what you need to do is you need to submerge it in water of about, don't do this at home, kids. This is not instructions on how to demilitarize Willie Pete. I'm just telling you, this is the kind of stuff we're dealing with here. And from an artifact point of view, because that's something I'm really deeply and passionate about. Nothing tells a story like artifacts. And these artifacts are so rare because first you need to submerge your Willie Pete device in water heated up to about 105 degrees Fahrenheit. And then that will help dissolve the Willie Pete solution. Then you siphon out while it's still submerged the Willie Pete and disgorge that in a safe area. And if it's not in a contained vessel and it doesn't have a booster charge to make it all go at once and explode, what it'll do is it'll pop and fizzle relatively harmlessly as long as it doesn't get on you. And that's how you demilitarize this stuff. So anyways, this is the kind of dangerous munitions we're dealing with here. So you brought up napalm, and I wanted to get your take on white phosphorus. So again, I can get really far into the weeds in terms of artifacts and this equipment, but it's the story that it tells that is why I feel it's so important. And coming back to your mission here, you're calling in napalm. What were some other tools in terms of air assets that you found to be incredibly useful in deterring determined NVA assaults?
Well, I mean, my favorite is still, the Claymore.
Mm-hmm.
I mentioned to you, almost everyone on my teams would carry 3 Claymores. The M79 gunner normally didn't because he had to carry all that extra 40 millimeter ammunition and stuff. The point man didn't normally carry 3. He'd have 1, so he was lighter and could move around easier. But I mean, that it's just devastating. I mean,
yeah.
If nothing else, the concussion from it, if you're close to it.
Yeah.
And then those balls going out through there, all of the debris that it kicks up to go with it, the smoke, the sound, the blast wave that's coming from it. And then, I like to do multiples.
Yeah.
And man, I mean, it just got their attention.
Yeah.
And then you have them in layers. You have individuals that you can, pop in a time fuse on and just set it as you're, running away. Yeah. It goes off behind you, and it's just a lot you can do with it. But if we were going to be stopped for more than just a few minutes, we'd put out claymores.
Put out your claymores.
Go. But yeah, that was a biggie. And in terms of from the air, I really liked the 20 millimeter on the A1E Sky Raiders. They can come in so slow, mm-hmm. and they can be so accurate with mm-hmm. where they. I mean, I've had them putting it within 10 meters of us.
Whoa!
And 20 millimeter. I mean, those things will cut down trees.
Yeah. But very serious.
And we found in 69, by the time we, particularly the latter part of 69, the NBA were learning a lot about us, our tactics, and how to deal with us. And one was they found that if they could get close enough to us, it was hard. I mean, I can't bring napalm on you if we're 10 feet away, So they would do what they called hugging. They would go hug a SOG team, get right up as close as they could to us while they're fighting to try to prevent us from, putting ordnance on. But the 20 millimeter, I mean, I'd still be able to, a lot of times, use that right up close.
Yeah.
And so I enjoyed that. You know, the mini guns and even the rockets and the 40 millimeter that the gunships are firing. If you're under double and triple canopy, a lot of that stuff is getting stopped before it gets to the ground. The trees are stopping it. They're hitting tree limbs. They may cut the tree limb off, you know, but it doesn't hit the guys down below that you're trying to hit. So they're putting a lot of rounds and a lot of rockets and 40 millimeter ordnance down there, but it's not as effective as it is when you're out in a more open area, like the guys down south. You know, CCC and CCS, their terrain was much more open than ours. So, you know, the gunships and things were probably more effective in getting the ordnance to the ground.
Gotcha. So you've made, we've gone through the jungle, we've made contact, we've explored the tools in the toolkit to gain fire superiority and survive in the face of often, you know, over 10 times easily. You know, the odds are just incredible, the amount of numbers that folks such as yourself are facing. Let's walk through the various forms of extract. How the hell do you get out?
It's nice if you got the got the fire suppressed enough that, you know, the helicopter can just come in and you can run out, jump on it, and take off and go. Excuse me.
No worries.
But most of the time, most of the extractions I was involved with, at least, the bad guys just, I guess they just loved us so much they didn't want us to leave. So they would shoot at the helicopters that were trying to come in to get us. And, you know, trying to get on a helicopter when all those jokers are shooting at you is tough. So let me say, there's one of the pictures that I think you've seen of me where I have a little bush hat on, but I've cut a little bit of the bloom off of it. But I like to have my people wear those little hats, because on the inside of those hats, you would cut a piece of the VH17 panel and sew it in there. So I could tell the extraction ships when they were coming to get us, when they were coming to pick us up, you know, we're wearing orange, you know, don't shoot the orange guys. You know, because all of my people look just like the bad guys that are coming out of the woods trying to get the helicopter, you know, so we could flip those things inside out. So now we've got orange on top of our head. So the door gun, because the door gun is going to shoot whatever's moving out there. So if you've got that on, then, you know, that one technique to help us get on a little easier. And sometimes you had to just grab the skids. They'd come in, slow down a little bit, and continue to go. You'd have to grab the skids and pull yourself up in the aircraft. And sometimes there's not a real clearing where they could land. So we had a couple of different types of ladders that they could drop down. They're, you know, metal ladders on a cable. And you grab a hold of that, pull yourself up a few rungs, and put your snap leak onto it to keep you from falling off if you got hit. And they just fly away with the ladders with your hanging on it. Sometimes, you know, you had to come up through the canopy, and you'd take 120, 150 foot climbing rope and daisy chain it inside of a sandbag, and they put a full sandbag of sand fastened to the end of it, and have a little strap that was called a McGuire rig on it. So you could push the sandbag out of the helicopter, and it would pull the rope out of the sandbag, go down through the canopy, down to the ground, so you could go, get to it, sit in that strap, fasten your left arm through a little strap that was a little higher up on it. And then they would lift you up through the canopy. Supposedly, they'd lift you all the way out of it, and then they would start moving forward almost without fail. They would get you close to the top, and they'd start moving forward. So, you're fighting off the tree limbs and everything else. And the bad guys are shooting at you the whole time. Later, a new type of harness was developed called a stable rig. And that had leg straps on it that you could pull around and fasten. And you had two connectors up on top here that you hook the rope into. So it pulled you out more stable. You were able to have both hands free to shoot or fight through the limbs. And you didn't have to try to put on something.
Yeah.
You just had to grab the rope and clip those two snap links in, and you were ready to go.
Wow.
The other way was to use a swift seat. So you had a 12-foot piece of climbing rope, and you'd have to make a little, harness, which it's very difficult to do when people are shooting at you, and particularly if you have to be lying on the ground trying to put this thing on and not get hit at the same time. So
yeah,
we used to practice a lot putting those on while on the ground.
Oh, okay.
Sometimes if we were expecting contact and we might get hit soon, we might go ahead and put them on, in advance, stop and kind of put them on while we're not getting shot at. So at least we were ready. So those are some of the ways you came out.
Gotcha. The last podcast that was on the Modern Military History podcast series was a deep dive into a book called Bright Light, and written by an author by the name of George Vyeth. And it's just a historical, well, what it is it's a historical account of bright light efforts throughout the Vietnam War. So the audience is hopefully a little bit privy to bright light, but I would like you in your own terms to walk us through what bright light was, and your if any involvement you had with bright light efforts or stories you know of in terms of bright light efforts of your time with SOG.
From my perspective, experience, bright light was a rescue mission. It might be down pilots. It might be a team that was overrun or lost, and you would send a team in to try to recover them. Most people viewed those as probably one of the most dangerous missions you could go on, because the bad guys knew you were coming, and they were waiting on you when you got there. So bright light team would usually travel with just mostly ammunition and stuff. Maybe one meal with them at the most, but leave the food behind because you're going to be busy shooting and fighting, trying to find these people and get them out. It may or may not include a medic as part of the team, because you knew people were going to be pretty severely injured most of the time. So that's kind of an overview from my perspective. I did conduct some of those. There was kind of a famous story in SOG history, I guess, from Command and Control North. There was a team with Dennis Neal as the 1-0, and Michael Burns as the 1-1, and they had 4 Yards with them, and they went in on a mission. Dennis was my roommate.
Mm.
In CCN, all the operators lived in like two-man, or a building that was divided in half with two men living on each end of it. So Dennis and I, lived together. So his team had gone in. My team had been given a mission to recover some POWs who were being moved north into North Vietnam. So they had asked me to combine my team with Bruce Lombard's team. So that, we ended up with 23 people because we put a medic in there with them.
Yeah.
No, because it was going to be a real fight to try to get the POWs, and there were several of them, so we were going to have to be able to manage all of that.
Mm-hmm.
So we were at the launch site and getting ready to launch that morning, and we heard there was a little speaker outside the Tactical Operations Center, and we could hear the radio traffic, and we heard Dennis call for extraction. Just he'd finished the mission and he was just calling for a normal extraction. Telling he was ready to be picked up and where he was. So, we got word that we were probably going to launch a little bit later than what we'd planned because they were going to go get Dennis's team and bring Dennis's team in before, we got to launch. But then a few minutes or so later, all of a sudden, we get this, we hear radio transmission that they were being overrun and asking for somebody to help, declared, prayer fire emergency.
Prairie fire, yeah.
So, when we heard that, it was, wow.
Just like that, again, like that, it changed.
So they launched an extraction team to go out. Mm-hmm. And when they got there, they found two of the yard team members and pulled them out on strings. They really think, the crew chief says, there's no doubt in his mind there was a third person on the string. And there was in high elephant grass, the string popped loose. Mm. But they were receiving so much fire, they couldn't stay. They couldn't do anything. They got those two out. And they got them out and brought them back and started to debrief them. And they were told, they said that they saw 5 guys. They were at LZ. They saw 5 guys trying to sneak around on them. One of them opened fire on those 5 guys. Well, there were a lot more than 5. And one of them fired a B-40 rocket right into the middle of the team. And, firefight ensued. They said that the 2 Americans were killed right off. And the other 2 were yards were killed. And these 2 managed to escape. They were just happened to be in the right place to be able to escape from. The rest of them didn't get out. But the Cubby out in that area had picked up a transmission from the URT-10 radio that we carried, transmitted on the guard frequency, and said, somebody help me, please, God, somebody help me. And it was American voice, and it was just quick, no response to it. Nothing else was ever heard. And the Covey was not familiar with Dennis and Michael. So he didn't know whose voice it was. So there was no way to know who it was that made the transmission. But anyway, when all that happened, there was a hatchet force platoon up there that was going on another mission. So they decided to go ahead and launch them because they were getting ready to launch anyway. So they launched them out and, as a bright light, but they were pinned down on the landing zone, never got out of the woods. So they couldn't go anywhere. So then they came to me and said, okay, you're the new bright light team. So you're going in. So they put us in, on a different LZ, all of us. And we spent, I don't know, a day and a half trying to find them. We had to fight our way in. We had all kind of fights going on during the night. Fight the next day. Realized the next day we were in the middle of a bunker complex. And, Bruce, the other guy with me, Bruce took a little team and he's out kind of looking around. He's in a little ravine and he's climbing up the side and there's a little slit. And he looks in the slit and he sees the back of a North Vietnamese's head and thinks, holy shit. Cow. So he slides back, gets back down. And then he starts looking around. There are bunkers all over the place. They were dug in, camouflage, covered. You couldn't see them. We were in the middle of the complex. So anyway, later that day, they got us out, but we never found, Dennis and Michael. So, so that they sent us home and brought us back about a week later to go do the PW mission.
So, in the Bright Light podcast, in the Bright Light podcast I did, where I was just kind of walking people through, when I do a book, my goal is to try to get people to want to go read that book on their own time. It's all about, just here's a taste of it, what it's about, and on your own time, go pursue it. If you haven't heard that podcast, go ahead and take a listen. It's pretty short, so short and sweet. But what I really talk about is that for me, integrating the Vietnam story into the American story, so to speak, the narrative of our nation. There's so much controversy, negativity, political atmosphere surrounding Vietnam. It's really easy to fall into a really shameful narrative, for a lot of folks surrounding the war. And I think that's detrimental to everybody. I think we need to learn from our history. And I think when you're ashamed of something, you don't want to look at it. You don't want to come into contact with it. And you push it away and you never learn. And as a historian, it's all about trying to just present the history as it is and let it speak for itself. I think bright light as a topic is something more people need to understand, because especially POW MIA surrounding Vietnam is a very contentious subject. And my statement is just, when you really start to understand the heroic, Herculean efforts our servicemen performed attempting to get people out, attempting to rescue people, the sacrifice that people made, in many cases trading their own life to try to rescue somebody. It might be hokey, but I honestly and truly believe that the bright light story of Vietnam is a bright, shining light amongst history that can appear very dark for a lot of people. And it shows that during this conflict, the efforts such as yourself and that what you just shared, it's just, there's so much more there than simplistic narratives. There's so much more there than what a lot of people have been exposed to through pop culture. And the more you study, the more I think compassion, humility, and understanding can arise around these events. So walking into the middle of an NBA bunker complex to try to get some people out, and people that you knew, is it's just an absolute privilege and an honor to be any part of helping people understand this history and this story. So just that's what comes up for me. You mentioned prisoner of war operations, and I wanted to ask you about prisoner snatch missions. I gathered from listening to your appearance on the Jocko show, Jocko podcast, that the Terminator wasn't always successful at pulling out prisoners of war, but it wasn't for lack of trying. I was wondering if you could walk people through, using your own story as a catalyst, another very important facet of SOG, which was to gather prisoners, get human intelligence. We're trying to learn about the Ho Chi Minh Trail complex. We're trying to learn about Laos and Cambodia and the NVA networks and the communist efforts there. Let's get some people to tell us. So what's something that comes to your mind that you think would encapsulate that history for folks?
Sometimes, it never happened to me, but sometimes teams kind of stumble on to a prisoner, and we're able to get them. But for the most part, if it was a hardcore North Vietnamese, they would do anything to not be taken prisoner. I mean, you're going to look like you tangle with a bobcat if you try to grab one and capture him, because he'll fight to the death. And while he's fighting you to the death to keep you from taking him, his people are doing everything that they can to kill him, because they don't want him to be taken prisoner either. And just, I'll just give you a couple of little quick hits, but we went in, we set up the ambush to get prisoners. We actually grabbed 3 of them. Bloody battle, everything got turned upside down, but we got out of the kill zone with 3 prisoners, and we're trying to get to a landing zone, and the North Vietnamese just kept coming, and they're trying to shoot them. As we were moving to the landing zone, they killed one of them with a B-40 rocket, and several of my guys are wounded at this point too. So we're trying to drag our guys. We're trying to drag the prisoners. Prisoners, had a bag over their head. Their hands were tied behind them. We had a rope around their ankle that we could jerk their foot out from under them if they try to run. But they're falling down. They're trying not to stand up, doing anything they could to slow us down so that their guys, could get them. By the time we got to the helicopter, we had lost the 1 prisoner. We had another one that was, wounded pretty bad, but we still have 2. And we put 1 on the first aircraft that came in. I had the one that was wounded bad was with me. So we took off a couple of minutes behind the lead aircraft, and I'm sitting in the door, and I'm looking at the aircraft in front of me, and all of a sudden I see a body come out and go down, and I had on a headset, so I asked, how high are we right now? And the guy said, I think it was 2,600 AGL above the ground. So this guy went out with his hands tied behind his back, head first out of the aircraft, and entered the jungle canopy, probably traveling 180 miles an hour head first. He jumped out. He got loose and dove out, killed himself rather than be taken prisoner. The one that I had, we got a lot of information out of him on the ride, but I couldn't get the bleeding stopped. We went straight to the hospital. They tried for about 20 minutes in the ER, and they couldn't save him. He just lost too much blood. So we didn't get out, with a live one we could give to somebody. But we got information from them, but they do not want to be captured. They'd rather kill themselves. Their people would rather kill them. So it's a battle when you get a hold of a North Vietnamese. If it's a truck driver or somebody else, it's not going to be like that. But the hardcore North Vietnamese are tough. Now, Dick Meadows.
Oh man.
I mean, Meadows is famous for coming up on a group of people in North Vietnamese in a clearing on a trail, and just stepping out in the clearing with them, and in perfect Vietnamese, saying, "Good morning, gentlemen. You are all my prisoners." And then sorting the group into those who raised their weapon to try to shoot him that he killed, and the ones that dropped his weapon that he took prisoner. I mean, it was like, he could do things like that.
Dick Meadows is a legend.
Yeah.
Dick
Definitely.
Meadows is just somebody I wish that could have come on the podcast, but if I'm correct, he's no longer with us. But absolute legend, and the kind of dude that SOG would attract. I wanted to, if time still allows, I wanted to ask you if you could run us through a unexpected mission that you found yourself on when I believe you were supposed to be on R&R, and all of a sudden life happened, and you found yourself going on a mission.
Yeah, things like that happen, sometimes. I had come back from a mission. We'd been debriefed, and we were supposed to get a couple of days of R&R downtime before we were assigned our new mission. So I was trying to get out of the camp to make sure I didn't get put on some other kind of duty or something. I wanted the 2 days to rest, and I was leaving the compound. I heard a helicopter coming in, and it landed on a little helipad that I was walking within about 100 meters of, and there's a lot of activity going on there. And then one guy started waving and yelling, at me. So when I turned and started over to meet him to find out what was going on, and he asked me if I knew how to hook up a McGuire rig like we talked about earlier with the ropes and everything. So I told him I did. He said they had a team in contact. They had to, do an extraction. So I had my Quar 15 and a bandolier of ammunition. I just set it, leaned it up against the Connex container there, jumped up in the aircraft, and I'm attaching all the ropes and everything. And then I realized that, the aircraft was starting to vibrate. The RPMs had picked up a lot, and it was actually starting to lift off the ground. So I pulled the crew chief over, and I said, I'm not supposed to be on here. And he said, the pilot said, "Sorry about that. We got to go. There wasn't time to let you off." So we're taking off, and I'm thinking, well, be delayed a couple hours maybe. And then I realized, my weapon was still against the Connex container. I don't even have a weapon. We're flying out to a combat area. I'm not armed. I don't know where we're going. I don't know what's really going on. And so I'm sitting there kind of thinking, about what's going on, and this vision starts to occur where an aircraft in front of us, or had left in front of us to go out there, and the aircraft was shot down. And when we got there, in this vision, it was the only thing to do, only option is to go down one of the McGuire routes, go down the rope, get to the ground, and try to help the crew get out of the aircraft. And this thing keeps playing over and over. And I pull the crew chief over, and I tell him, what I was seeing. And I sat back down, and in a few minutes, he pulled me over, and he said, it's happening. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, the aircraft in front of us just got shot down. So I'm thinking, well, that's interesting. So anyway, when we get out there to the area, we make a quick pass, and we can see a hole in the canopy with smoke coming out of it, where the first aircraft that went out was shot down and crashed and totally burned. A second aircraft that went out there dropped a jungle penetrator down. It's kind of like a big grappling hook, like little seats on it. And they put the two severely wounded guys on that, and they're lifting it up through the canopy. That aircraft gets hit, loses power, starts to go forward. The jungle penetrator hangs on a big limb on a tree, and you have all that force on that little cable. The cable breaks, and it just fired the helicopter, just like being launched out of a slingshot or something, and right through the canopy down into a big ravine. And so we go over and we see the hole where they are, but they're still in the aircraft. And fuel spilling out on them. There are bad guys coming up. Bad guys are shooting at our helicopter. So anyway, I tell the crew chief to tell the pilot, if you'll go back over, let's drop the McGuire rig, and I'll go down the McGuire rig and go get the guys out of the helicopter. He didn't want to do that at first because of the fire coming up at us. I dropped the bag out. I saw it go into the canopy a little ways. And I thought, I don't have gloves and things, but I think that if I grab this nylon rope, didn't realize it was brand new at first, but I was thinking, if I grab this rope, wrap my feet around it, and I can slow myself down enough that, once I get down in the canopy, I'll grab a tree limb, something, climb down. I borrowed the crew chief's M16 that he had in the aircraft. He let me take that and 4 magazines. So it was time to go. And when I stepped off the skids, I realized the rope was so slick I couldn't hold it. And it's just that white rope sliding through my hands. After about 30 feet, all the skin's gone, meat, and it's just blood. So the rope is turning red. So I'm going down the rope, picking up speed. And I also realized the rope is about 15 feet above the canopy now. But when I got to the McGuire rig, I was able to at least stop for a few seconds, but I knew I couldn't hold on. I was going to have to turn loose and drop into the canopy. So the pilot's starting to move because he's wanting to get out of there because people are shooting at us. But as he moved over, I was kind of over the center of the tree. So I turned loose, fell in. I figured, I got 150 feet, managed to grab a limb to stop me. It was more difficult than I thought to do. I'm just bouncing off limbs. I couldn't hold on to anything. But finally I centered one and just kind of folded around it, knocked the breath out of me. But once I could breathe, I climbed that last 50 feet or so down to the ground. I had lost the magazine that was in the weapon, so I had to use one of the others. So that's, one magazine less. But as I started moving out from the tree and it got just a little way, I heard a twig break. And I looked, there's two North Vietnamese standing there. They're looking at me at the same time. They're starting to turn their guns. And I'm thinking, I think those are really North Vietnamese and not two team members from the team that's out there that's dressed like North Vietnamese.
Mm.
So anyway, I made the decision they were bad guys. So they were right next to each other. So I had to take them both out at the same time. And I had practiced a lot, emptying a 20-round magazine as I was going to the ground. And I used to do that with silhouettes all the time. So I saw both of them get hit several times as I was going down. So I stayed down for a couple of minutes. I didn't hear anything, so I figured they were done. So then I moved out to try to find the helicopter that was in the ravine. And as I got close, all of a sudden I heard a gunshot, and I thought, that sounds more like a pistol. I think the crew was shooting at me. So the pilot had seen me and was shooting his .38 pistol at me. I yelled at him, told him I was a good guy. They didn't believe me. So I counted his bullets. When I figured he had to reload, I charged with my weapon in the air saying that I was a good guy, so they didn't shoot me. So eventually I got all of them out and I put them in a place that I thought was somewhat defensible for them with just pistols. They were all busted up and everything. I told them stay there till I came back. The pilot kept saying, "Where are your people?" And I said, "It's just me. This is it. But I'm going to get you out of here.
Yeah.
You stay right here until I come back. I will get you out of here." So he just wasn't believing that there was no one else with me. But anyway, I worked my way up to where the team had been in contact. And I heard some loud discussions going on there in English. I yelled at the team, told them I was coming in. I went in. The pilot of the first aircraft that had gone down and burned was an Air Force lieutenant colonel.
Mm-hmm.
And he was trying to tell the team that he was in charge because he was a lieutenant colonel.
Breaking that rule of SOG we talked about.
So when I got there, I told him, well, actually, I was in charge because I was the ground commander. He when he's in his helicopter, he's in charge. But once he's on the ground, it's the ground commander, and that's me. He said, "No, the lieutenant doesn't tell me what to do." And the team members turned their weapons toward him and said a couple of things. And the team leader, the 1-0, said, "Sir, these guys say the lieutenant's in charge. If they want to, they can make you disappear and never be found again. So you need to do what the lieutenant says." So he backed down. So we had to do some things, did some airstrikes or gunships and stuff like that. I went and found the guys who were on the jungle penetrator, got them off, carried their bodies back up. Turned out one of those, I couldn't recognize him, but the lieutenant colonel told me what his name was, and I thought, "Oh, cow, that's a friend of mine." I was just talking to him yesterday. He volunteered to go on this mission in place of his buddy because his buddy only had a couple of weeks left.
Mm-hmm.
So he told his buddy he was going to take this mission. He wasn't letting him go. But anyway, so it's kind of a long story, but eventually we got a helicopter out that dropped in some demolitions, some C4 and blasting caps and stuff. So I was able to use those to blow down some trees to make a big enough hole in the canopy that another helicopter could come in and lift everybody out, a couple of guys at a time, into the helicopter. And we worked some gunships on the bad guys. Eventually got out, got back to the compound. The colonel wanted to see me, so I met him, and he and the aviation commander were all upset at me. I thought they were going to say, "Hey, good job," but that's not what they said. And I don't understand what's the problem. And he said, "Well, you left a guy out there." And I said, "No, we brought everybody back." And he said, "No, the crew chief for the first helicopter is missing. He didn't come back. Nobody, the pilot didn't tell me one of his guys was missing." So, my boss said, it's already late now. He said, you got to go back in at first light tomorrow and recover the body and destroy the good helicopter that's out there, so the bad guys don't get it. But it rained for 2 days, which was good. Gave me a little time for some of the pain to go away in my hand, back out, and expecting to be ambushed on the way down to the site, but they didn't. Found the body. I was supposed to blow up the helicopter, so I was in the helicopter putting the leftover ordnance in there, the C4, to blow it up. The bad guys came up, started shooting at us. So put my team up on the top of the ravine. I was in the helicopter packing all this stuff, and they knew I was in there, so they started shooting at the helicopter. So the bullets are coming in, hitting the C4. That's not a big deal, but I've got the blasting caps, and at some point I have to put the blasting caps in. When I do that, if a bullet hits one of those, it'll all go. So finally, it was time. They were getting closer, so I ignited the 2 time fuses, dove out the side of the helicopter, and scampered up the hill, and they came assaulting up and got behind the helicopter, and they're shooting up at us. And my team and I are kind of looking at each other and thinking, do they not realize what I was doing in there? Do they not see the smoke that's coming out of the cockpit from the time fuse that's burning? And there's 40 pounds of C4 in there. So anyway, they were vaporized pretty much along with the helicopter when all that stuff went off. But they had a lot more friends coming up, so we had to work airstrikes, and eventually got up on top of the mountain, got away from them, and we had to set up there for 2 days because of the weather before we could get extracted and come back in. So that's kind of a long story, but it wasn't how I had planned my next couple of days.
No, you got robbed. You're supposed to be having some R&R, and it was a double whammy of just. I just had to get that story in here. I appreciate you making time for that. Time's running short, and I don't want to go too much longer. But there is something I do want to touch on, and this is for people listening. One of the reasons I think sharing the story and the history of folks such as of yourself, and one of the reasons it's so important, not only just to have out there as a resource for people who are studying history, not only as a resource to enrich and help complete our national narrative concerning Vietnam, we are facing as not only as a society, but as a country, a real crisis of veteran suicide rates, post-traumatic stress disorder. I am not a veteran, but I want to do everything I can to help in any way possible people who have served this country, who have put themselves, in the line of duty. And even if you're not a veteran, even if you're somebody who has gone through a traumatic experience, somebody who has been to hell and back, often coming back is one of the most difficult, at least not only just from personal experience, we don't have to get into it, but in terms of experiences I've heard, coming back is a job in itself. I would love to ask you and get your final kind of story, I guess, for this podcast. You something that I found just so profound was your explanation when we started of you get on the airplane in America, you get off the airplane and you're in Vietnam, and it's just a shock. Everything's different. You're seeing the tops of people's heads. It smells different. It sounds different. You have to carry a weapon everywhere. If you don't carry a weapon anywhere, you might find yourself on a helicopter sliding down a McGuire rig, so running a double whammy bright light, completely that's Vietnam. And I've heard this, especially from the book written by one of the SEAL Team 6 DevGru guys who went on the Osama bin Laden mission. I think he got in quite a bit of hot water for writing his book, but I've read it and it's one of the only things you can really read to learn about that in that kind of world. He equated special operations, and especially tier 1 special operations, and I would firmly argue that SOG was a tier 1 special operations group of its time and instrumental in SFOD, Delta Force, and DevGru development later, etc. Worked with the SEALs, all kinds of stuff. My point of bringing this up and explaining this is that in this book written by this fellow who is part of SEAL Team 6 DevGru, he equated special operations, tier 1 special operations, as getting on is like getting on a speeding train, and getting off can be just as difficult. While you're there, it's a hell of a ride, and it's an experience in itself that people such as myself who have never done it can never understand. But as somebody who was on that speeding train, what was it like for you? And in as much detail as you're comfortable sharing, and with absolute respect, I asked this question: what was it like for you to get off of that speeding train, and in this case, getting off of that airliner once you were done with your 40 some missions, both in country and out of country, doing things like we've heard you talk about, being on that bullet train? What was it like for you to get off, and how did you, for lack of a better term, survive that? Because a lot of people, not only from the Vietnam generation, but from the current generation, don't survive that process. What was that like for you, sir, and how can we learn from that?
I'd just say, to start with, I think I was very fortunate. So, and a lot of people were not as fortunate as I was. I knew before I left there to come back that I was going to the Rangers. So a lot of people got out of the military when they came back. A lot of SOG guys got out. And that was their last assignment, and within a few months or a year, they were out. And I think even if it wasn't SOG, if you were coming back from Vietnam and you went back out into the civilian world, you, for the most part, you didn't have anyone you could talk to who knew what you were talking about. They couldn't relate to what you were saying. And I think those people had it extremely rough because they didn't have the support group. They didn't have anyone they could talk to. People who remained in the service at least had someone they could talk to. So I'll tell you that when I got on the plane to leave Vietnam, at that time in the world, a lot of people were hijacking planes to fly them to some other country or whatever. Part of my attitude was, when I got on the plane, was that this plane is not going to be hijacked. It's just not going to happen. Uh, I I was fully armed, and I was not going to let anyone hijack that plane or the plane that I got on when I got to California to fly back across the country. Um, you didn't have to go through metal detectors, all of those. You didn't have all of that. So I was armed, and I still had the mentality, from SOG of, bad guys get taken out, and that's what I do. I take them out. So part of the transition, for me was, um, I had to transition to a new set of rules because I had to operate in a place where um, the rules of engagement were very different for me. If you were in SOG, the places you went to were free fire zones. Everyone was an enemy. And you either had to terminate them or they were going to terminate you. And, that was just kind of the mentality. But when you stepped off the plane in California, you were back in this other world now where, there are laws, there are rules, there are things you can't do. You can't just, take out somebody. And, you have to transition out of that mindset. There's things that you can't do. You're back in that other world that you had left. You're back there now. Um, so, that was part of it. And, so when I got home, I had 30 days before I had to show up at my next assignment. So, um, just a quick example because I'm going to have to go. But um, my father and cousin Carl spent 3 years in Vietnam, and part of that with the Rangers. But they wanted to go to this little pond over in the woods and get a duck. So I wasn't excited about going hunting, but it's okay. And I had a 12 gauge shotgun, automatic, and we're going and we get close to the pond, and the duck, jumps up. I shot the duck twice as I was going to the ground behind the tree, and then I shot it two more times, and my cousin and my father are saying, "What are you doing?" And my response was, "It moved. It was still alive." And I mean, there's nothing but feathers and guts all over everything, you know. So that mindset, is still in there, and I'm having to say, I can't do this. And in fact, I stopped hunting. I, I couldn't go out and just enjoy walking through the woods because I'm looking everywhere. I'm smelling. I'm sensing everything around me. I'm waiting on the ambush. I'm looking for a bad guy, and so didn't want to do it. In fact, I went down not long after that and spent the night with Dick Meadows, and he wanted to go hunting and deer hunting the next morning. Oh, so I went with him. But when he came back, I just said to myself, "That's it. I am no more hunting. I can't walk around out there, with people, that I might shoot by accident, because they jump up in front of me or they do something that scares me." So, but I went from there to my assignment with the Rangers. Everybody there, uh, almost without exception, had been to Vietnam. So there was somebody I could talk to. We could relate to each other. We all,
you were still in the community. Yeah, you were still in the community,
yeah,
so to speak. and still in the military too. So you had
Yeah.
a mission.
Right. So that made it a lot easier for me. I needed something um, to get the adrenaline rush that you got from the mission. So I started um, doing free fall parachute jumped. I went to Halo school, so I could free fall. So that gave me a little adrenaline rush, making those high jumps and things,
Oh
and
God.
was jumping every weekend, every chance I got. So doing things like that kind of helped. Having people to talk to helped,
Mhm.
and my uh, expectation was that within about 8 or 9 months, I'd be going back to Vietnam, back to SOG. I got orders, and then all of a sudden they were canceled. There were about 20 of us.
Mhm.
There were the Rangers who orders were canceled, and they said, we need people with combat experience here, teaching, training.
Yeah.
So you guys are going to stay here. Uh,
Gotcha.
so delayed me from going back, and ended up not going back again.
I'm
So
I really want to delve into more about not only your experience with life after SOG, but you're an incredible person. You've done incredible things. Um, you've well, first you went out and you got your Ph.D. in psychology. You worked with the military on being a military expert on stress. You've written books, one of which I read your book that I was able to get a hold of, The Stress Effect. And all of this I think would be really helpful to veterans. We've run out of time. Um, and maybe in the future we could come back and talk a little bit more about this topic so we could hopefully help people a little bit more. We'll see. But unfortunately, we've run out of time for today. Um, Mr. Thompson, Dick Thompson, I can't say what a privilege it has been. And being able to speak with you, being able to ask you the questions that I've always wanted answered, and also the humility that you have going on in the face of the things you've done, um, and continue to do and continue to do. Been following your Instagram, your Facebook. Where can people find you if they want to follow you? Where can the audience go if they want to scratch the Dick Thompson itch that has now developed for them? Because if you haven't, then you haven't been listening. Where should they go? How can they find you?
um, Dick Thompson on Facebook. Instagram is HPS underscore CEO.
Gotcha. I'll
Um,
link I'll link that stuff so people can find it. Um, any closing any closing statements from you for now?
I really appreciate the opportunity to come on and share some thoughts with you about my experience, and it was my perspective. Everybody didn't experience everything the same way, but um, that's what I saw, what I experienced. Um, I do try to do a lot with the vets and raising suicide awareness, and you'll see that if you go to the website or out to the Instagram. But we gotta take care of these guys.
Yes.
We don't. The country just doesn't do that. So we've got to try to take care of them, and working on a lot of different projects along that line to find ways to help them. I talk to vets every day, so
If somebody from the audience wants to get involved and do their part and help people who have put it all on the line, And that's, that's not just, combat folks, that's anybody in the team that makes, makes the show happen. If people want to help, where can they go? Let's direct some people, to some resources that come Dick Thompson certified, Terminator certified, Terminator recommended.
If you go to www.thestresseffect.com, there are a lot of resources there, and we're putting more on all the time. Email me, dick@hpsys.com, and I can connect you places. So anything we can do to help take care of vets. If you are a vet, here I am. So be happy to talk to you and whatever we can do to help. So,
all right.
I really appreciate you giving us the opportunity to talk about this part.
Yeah. I want to spend more time on it, but we just can't.
Yeah.
So, maybe in the future, I keep turning things over, and I always have ideas, and part of the history is learning from it and moving forwards and getting better. And learning from people such as yourself is intrinsic to becoming better, not only as individuals, but better as a country, better as a society. So it's part of, I see it as part of my duty here, with whatever limited platform I have. It's, you can't study military history if you're not willing to also take on responsibility for taking care of our vets and giving them the respect, and opportunity that they have earned and deserve. But as I said, time's running thin. I can't say it enough. It is a privilege. It is an honor. It is somewhat of an out-of-body experience for me, looking at my own stress effect, being able to actually participate in helping spread this history. I'm Andrew with modernmilitaryhistory.com, at modmilhist on Instagram, the Modern Military History Podcast, Modern Military Gaming, the second YouTube channel for video games and all kinds of fun stuff. The Beer Cast is there. That's the podcast where I drink a beer and we talk about all kinds of fun military history stuff. That's who I am. Today we spoke with Mr. Dick Thompson, SOG warrior, absolute legend, Ph.D., the Terminator. And this has been Modern Military History Podcast. Thank you again, sir.
Thank you, Andy. I really appreciate it.